Men and women of ICE to keep themselves and their families safe.
But Del Pozo counters that, quote, everyone in government is vulnerable to doxing. Should a pool of judges issue anonymous verdicts? Should legislatures pass bills by secret ballot? Our police should be the literal face of the nation's courage, unafraid to show the public who they are. Joining me now to discuss is author of that Atlantic piece, Brandon Del Pozo. He is a retired police chief who spent nearly 2 decades with the NYPD and 4 years as chief of police in Burlington, Vermont. He is currently an assistant professor at Brown University. Professor Del Pozo, thanks so much for joining us. Let's get right to the heart of this. ICE says that the masks are absolutely necessary to protect the safety of their agents and to prevent doxing. But you argue that anonymous policing poses even greater threats to society. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Well, first of all, American police have been facing much greater dangers, equal or greater, as ICE for decades, since the beginning, in fact, arresting rapists, arresting robbers, killers of all sorts. They've never thought to mask themselves, to protect themselves from retribution. I used to get calls from the state police when certain felons got out of prison saying, chief or officer, depending where I was at the time, just so you know, that man that threatened your life is now out of prison. I never for a second thought of hiding my face from the public, hiding my face from the people I policed, nor did any cop that I knew and worked with. We were proud that we had the courage to do our jobs that way. And if people get confused by what's happening when masked men are coming out of nowhere and grabbing people off the street, that's a worse safety risk to ICE than doxing, which should be illegal and should be prosecuted, but is not the most important thing here in our democracy.
Well, to that point, in your piece for The Atlantic, you wrote that anonymous policing could, quote, expose federal agents, local police, and the public to physical dangers that make the risks of doxing seem minor in comparison. And you note that masks are often a marker of criminals looking to intimidate their prey while avoiding identification. Are we actually seeing some of these dangers playing out right now? And are they putting law enforcement and ICE enforcement in danger?
Yeah, so there's been many tragic cases of misidentification between police officers in different agencies, even within the same agency, on duty and off duty. There are already people wearing masks and impersonating ICE officers to commit felonies. When you have local police, other jurisdictions responding to masked men with guns, masked women with guns, masked folks, it sets up a recipe for disaster, right? And I'm not making that up. There are cops that have been killed by friendly fire from other cops in cases of misidentification, criminal impersonation, plus people running around with guns wearing masks sets ICE up for misidentification that can end in tragedy. That's not hypothetical. That's happened throughout policing already, even without the masks.
Yeah. L.A. Mayor Karen Bass shared some similar concerns over this issue over the weekend with regard to ICE deportations in Los Angeles. Let's take a listen.
These masked men pull up in unmarked cars and jump out of the cars with rifles and detain people. So for the average citizen, it looks like it's a violent kidnapping.
I don't think you have a right to have a mask and snatch people off the street. I am just hoping that this reign of terror ends.
So I assume that you agree with her assessment, and notably a bill was recently introduced in the California Senate to prohibit law enforcement officers from wearing masks during arrests or detentions. Do you think that kind of legislation will have an impact? And if that impact is felt at the state level, could it then migrate to ICE enforcement at the federal level?
I mean, we have a federal government that loves to challenge state and local government when it doesn't agree with them and loves to flout whatever they say if it's not part of their, agenda. I think the shame of all this is that it takes an act of legislation. When you go from department to department across the country, the men and women that have been policing our cities and, communities bravely with courage for decades never thought of doing their jobs wearing masks. And I think that ICE should look up to the American police that have been doing this harder and longer and more dangerously, putting themselves on the line for decades, like not afraid to show their faces. They're the role models in this case.
All right. Brandon Del Pozo, excellent piece in The Atlantic. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.